Hi, I'm Mike from 1A Auto. We've been selling auto parts for over 30 years.
Hi everyone, Sue here at 1A Auto, and today on our 03 Volvo V70 we're going to show you how to remove and replace the front rotor and brake pads. If you need these parts or any other parts for your car, click on the link below and head on over to 1aauto.com. First thing we're going to do is remove the tire. I have weight on the tire of the vehicle still, so I can break the lug nuts free, and this is a 19 millimeter. I'm just going to break them free, then raise the vehicle up. Now that the car is up in the air, I can remove the lug studs. This is what a European car does. There's not lug nuts because there's no studs on the hub, so it's a whole post. So when you get to your last one, you better have both hands ready to grab the tire. So I don't, like, this one's frozen on there, but normally the wheel will fall right off. So just keep one of the lug studs partially threaded in, and you break it free. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to take the boot off of the caliper bleeder screw. I'm going to set that aside. It's 11 millimeter wrench, and I'm going to break this free. Just loosen it up and just snug it because I want to loosen it once the caliper is hanging. Turn the wheel all the way to the left so I can get to the caliper slider bolts. So they have plastic covers on them to keep the dirt and road salt out. They're just plastic boots, and it's an inverted inside Allen head. That's how the European cars do it. So we remove the plastic covers, just grab them, pull them out, and that's going to be a 7 millimeter Allen head. Fits right in there. We're going to break the caliper sliders free. And this is considered a pin. It's what the caliper slides on when the hydraulics are released and applied. I'm going to just loosen up my top one before I take that pin completely out. So sometimes I take a flathead screwdriver on these kind of style slider pins, and I push while I'm from the other side. So see how you can spin it, it just spins in place because it sits inside a plastic bushing like. So a flathead screwdriver, and then you can slide it, pull it, grab it and pull it right out. So you'll see from here, here's an angle of where that bolt just sits. So when I do this, look, it just spins in place now that it's unthreaded. So I just take a flathead and I just pry it out, and there we go. Now I'm going to take the caliper spring out, and that's basically a flathead screwdriver, and I just pry it one end off at a time. And set that aside. Now I can pry this caliper off. I'm just going to take a pry bar, fit it in there. And there we have our caliper. I'm going to remove the inner pad. Look at all that rust, holy moly. Wow, let's dump that in the bucket. Oh, that's a good lesson right here. So I was just gonna check for caliper to see if it pushed back and, leave it in the car. I'm not leaving this caliper in this car. The actual caliper is breaking down internally. The metal is separating. It's huge flakes, and it's breaking off. Wow. So what happens under, look at that. Look at all the metal, the new metal. So this piston, an average caliper goes to 3,000 PSI with pressure from hydraulics. So this is a good lesson right here that you don't think, it was just surface rust. This piston is 3,000 PSI when you apply the brakes. That's going to leak and blow. And I don't want to be the one behind the wheel or in front of your car. So we're definitely replacing these calipers. So now we can remove the outer brake pad, and it just slides. It's got these nice little ear tabs and slides right in and out. So let's remove the caliper bracket. And I'm going to hang this caliper up with my new fancy hook from 1A Auto. As you can tell, I love that. So now we can remove the caliper bracket, and it's a 15mm socket. There's 2 of them. Let's get the top one. I want to make sure I get that socket on there because I don't want it to round the bolt off. So I'm going to tap that in with a hammer. Okay, here we go. There we go. I'll hold the bracket, and I'll take these 2 bolts out. So it's got the stopper plate arm here too. That floats, it's part of the bracket bolts. So it just goes in between the bolts and the bracket. So this is the, as soon as I get this free here. Here we go. So the bracket comes out, and that's the Volvo, so that's how it lines up. That's the turn stop on a Volvo. Now we can remove our rotor, which the hold down bolt is a 10mm socket. I'll just break that free. And obviously hold the rotor, because it's going to want to fall right off. Okay, remove that. Here we have our new rotor and pads for our Volvo 03 V70 from 1A Auto. We have a nice cross-cut rotor. Here we have the factory rotor. They're both the same height and diameter. The hat's the same thickness. Same amount of cooling fins. That's a plus. Even cut for the inverted cooling. Backside has a nice rounded hat. Identical to the factory one. The pads are of the same nature. We have a nice angle cut to help the brake dust disappear and the cooling cut. This is past the cooling cut. Both come with the spring mount on the back. And then the outer pad. If you need this part or any other part for your car, click on the link below and head on over to 1aauto.com. So now I'm going to install my new rotor backwards, because that's the way I roll. No, I'm just joking. Backwards, because I'm just going to clean it if it stays there. I'm just going to clean it with some brake clean. I want to take the oil coating that they package it with. I want to take that off. And then now I can flip it around, and I'm going to line up the bolt hole, the mounting hole, right there. So now I can reattach my mounting bolt. And that's a 10mm socket. You just snugget it down so it holds the rotor in place. And now I'm going to turn the wheel all the way to the left. So we're installing a new caliper on this system. But if you were to use the old caliper, because say it was in good shape and you could use it, I would clean up in here. There's no hardware, but you just want to get the brake dust out. You could use a wire brush and just clean out the road dirt and the brake dust so that the new pads will have a nice clean surface to slide in and out on. And do not apply any silicone or caliper grease. You want that left raw metal with the pad on it. Here we have the turn stop bracket that mounts on the back side of the caliper, and these are the caliper bolts. So it's very, very important to clean out the old thread lock on that and reapply new and torque this down. So I'm going to take this to the wire wheel, I'm taking the bolts over, and I'm going to clean the threads. So I have my new caliper here, and I'm going to take the slider bolts out and install the bracket separately. And that also gives me a chance to examine the slider pins and make sure that there's a good amount of lube added to that. Don't ever assume when you buy a caliper brand new that the manufacturer loads that up. Because I've received some from the same brand where you're like, oh, they lubed them up for me. Great, I install it, and the other caliper on the other side has 0 in it. So if you don't do the job, double check. So there you go. If you are not getting a new caliper, the other thing you want to do is take a wire wheel to these pins and clean them up so that they look smooth, like that. And then apply a brake caliper grease to inside of your caliper, right in here, and install the boot. The pin, just like that, in the boot. And now we're going to install the bracket so we can get onto the caliper. So you take your caliper bracket and you guide it onto the rotor, and this is the knuckle. And now we're going to take the turn stop, mount that. Now I can thread it into the caliper bracket. That's between the knuckle and the turn stop. There we go. $15mm ratchet wrench. I'm just going to snug them down. We've got that thread locker on the threads, so you've got to work quickly, and then we'll torque it down to the manufacturer's specs, and then we can move on to the actual caliper piston. Caliper bracket to knuckle bolts is 74 foot-pounds. Now, if I was to reuse the old caliper, obviously it would be attached to the car right now, and you want to push this piston back. You want to open the bleeder screw. That's why we opened it in the beginning of the brake job. Have a bucket that the fluid can go in, and now we're just going to push that piston back. And the reason you do that is you never want to reverse the fluid on a system that has ABS. And then you would tighten up the bleeder screw. And let that hang or hook it up. The flex hose still would be attached. Now I'm going to install my pads. The outer pad is the one with just the backing slider pin. This one with the springs goes on inside the piston. So you just literally place them on like that. So you take the inner pad, line up those 3 rabbit ears springs, and push it in like that. Now you want to make sure you pull those slider pins flush so that when you install this, they won't be stopping you from going on. Hold the outer pad because it will try to fall out. Wonderful. Now we can thread it in. Now it's a 7mm Allen head for that slider bolts. Just thread them in. I'm going to bottom them out and then get my torque wrench and torque those. The torque spec is 22 foot-pounds on the slider bolts. Okay, so we have to install our flex hose in the new caliper. So we're going to remove it from the old caliper. It's a 14mm wrench, and I'm going to hope that this breaks free. That went oddly smooth. Oh, I hope yours goes as smoothly as that. I have a catch bucket underneath. I'm just going to spin the caliper around, make it the easiest. So now that we've discovered that the European car, I'm just so used to banjo bolts that you snap the caliper free. The caliper actually spins around on the flex hose because you can't turn the flex hose. There's no free floater nut there. So we're just gonna take the caliper off and put her on the flex hose, and I'll snug it up once it's mounted. Don't forget to remove your shipping cap. So now I'll take this caliper in my hand, take that boot out, and thread it in. Feel that bottom out. Slide it back on. Start the slider bolts. I'm going to retorque those to the 22 foot-pounds. Now with the caliper in place, I can turn this hose the quarter turn that I need to snug it in. And now I'm going to put my caliper spring on. So we're going to put the anti-rattle clip spring bracket. There's a key to this. See, these are at an angle, and so are the guides on that. I like to put the bottom one in first, and its spring goes right there. Then I will put this top one in. Make sure that that goes all the way down in by, sometimes I just take a hammer, and I'm going to tap that into place. See how it goes underneath it? There we go. And don't forget to put your inner boot covers on. It stops the road salt and sand from getting in there to your sliders. So now that you've done a front brake job on your Volvo, you did the other side the same as you did the driver's side. Now it's time to pump the brakes up. We're going to pump the brakes up and gravity bleed. So once you've pumped your brakes and the pistons are extended out and the pads are hitting the rotors, you check your master cylinder, which is located up here in front of the driver's seat. The reservoir is right here, and the cover. On this particular model, it only allows .4 brake fluid. .4 brake fluid. It's a European car. Some newer models are 3 and 4 mix. This is .4 only. So we will be adding .4. I'm replacing the cap so I don't get any dirt or debris in there. And I'm just going to gravity bleed. By doing that, I'm placing a bucket underneath the bleeder screw, and I'm going to pop it open. Now if you're bleeding the system, gravity bleeding, you're going to start, if you did the other side caliper, which I strongly recommend all calipers are done in a pair, you will bleed the right front first, then the driver's side. It's going to take a while because this is a brand new caliper, so the fluid has to make it out and come down here. And you're just going to keep an eye on it, let it gravity bleed. Here it comes. And you'll see little air pockets coming out, air bubbles. We're going to shut it off when that comes to a complete stop. And sometimes it could take 2 to 3 minutes. So don't think it stopped, because here comes more. So now I've got a nice steady stream with no air bubbles coming out. And I'm going to close the bleeder screw. Make sure it's nice and snug. I'm going to take some cleaner and clean that up. Make sure I put my cap back on. Don't forget to, if you get someone to help you, have them pump up the brakes and hold the pedal, and you can give yourself a visual. Make sure there's no fluid leaks out of the flex hose threading or the bleeder screw threading. Now before I install my wheel on my European car, I'm going to use the wheel stud pin set that 1A Auto supplies. It comes with 2 sets, a 12 by 1.5 or 14 by 1.25. In this case, our Volvo is a 14 by 1.25. I'm just going to put 2 of them in there. I'm not going to use all 4. And that way, when I pull the tire up, it has something to rest on. And anyone that's ever worked on a European car knows the frustration of trying to hold the wheel up and thread in a lug stud. So the neat thing about this is how it works. I just need to line up 2 of those studs. Now I can just walk away. That's the great part. Get my lug nuts, studs I mean, and I can just take my time threading them in by hand. And it's not going to fall off. So now that I've got 3 of the lug studs in there, I'm just going to tighten down, hand tighten 2 of them so that the wheel is flat against the hub. Now I can remove my helping guide pins. I can just back those out. I think it's a must for your toolbox. These things are crazy awesome, and it stops any frustrations. Now that I have them all hand tight, I can lower the vehicle down, put some slight weight on them, and torque them. So now I'm going to torque the wheel. I've got the weight of the vehicle on the tire, and the torque for this Volvo is 103 foot-pounds. And like usual, I'm going to do everything in a star pattern. Okay, let's double check. Now that the repairs are done on the driver's side, repeat the process on the passenger side.
Thanks for watching. Visit us at 1aauto.com for quality auto parts, fast and free shipping, and the best customer service in the industry.